defense. Let's go.
Welcome into week 2 of Training Camp Live, presented by Xfinity. Back at the Under Armour Performance Center, live pictures of the team getting their early stretch and work in today on a Monday. Helmets and shells after a couple full padded practices and a lively workout yesterday, Sunday at M&T Bank Stadium. And a welcome sight, Lamar Jackson back out on the field after missing the last 2 practices with what John Harbaugh described as a soft tissue injury, but back out there along with Marcus Peters, who missed a couple days of practice. Guys have one more practice tomorrow before an off day, so this is a stretch as the focus starts to narrow towards week 1, as we're less than 20 days away from a visit from the Cleveland Browns. This show now has a new co-host, Clifton Brown, longtime writer from all corners of the globe, but as you know him here the last couple of years, BaltimoreRavens.com. Cliff, good to be with you, man. How we doing?
Doing fine, Evan. It's great to be here. Another beautiful day at camp. The Ravens have really gotten lucky so far with the training camp weather, so should be able to get some good work in today. Anxious to see, obviously, Lamar back on the field, Marcus Peters. Good news for the Ravens to have those guys back. That was one of the themes of this unusual offseason. Would guys be more susceptible to injuries coming back after the offseason they had? The last thing you want to do is rush a key player or any player who's not feeling quite up to par through some of these practices. So I think it's great they got the weekend off. Obviously, it's great that they're back. And now, as we get ready for preparations for Cleveland, Lamar's back on the field and can start taking reps again.
Yeah, we've discussed at times about the ramp up, and that included an acclimation process, but there's a ramp up and an acclimation process to being in full pads. That's been the case here over the course of 7 days, 1 off day, so bodies are starting to react to the increased workload, but this team has held together very nicely in terms of players being able to stay healthy. It's a testament to the work. Cliff, I mentioned it. We had the stadium practice yesterday. Just good to be back in that building to get a sense of what it's going to be like with some artificial crowd noise, but probably more importantly, on the field. It was also, Cliff, your first practice that you could witness with your own eyes here for a long time. So your top takeaways from Sunday?
Well, it was definitely different to be in that atmosphere, you know, with the stadium being just us, the reporters and the players there, really no one else. But I definitely think it was good for the rookies to get a taste of that, where they're going to be playing their games. Obviously, with no preseason games, the first time they run through that tunnel for live action is going to be week 1. So I think for the younger players and the rookies, it was more important for them. But for all the players, it broke up the monotony. You know, these days can get monotonous, going against the same teammates, doing a lot of the same things. And I think the change of pace, as John Harbaugh mentioned, really kind of ramped up the intensity. So it is going to be interesting this year. The new atmosphere, Coach Harbaugh also remarked on them pumping the noise into the stadium, how it was a little louder than he expected it to be, and it's different. So it's the new normal, but again, I think them having a day to get over there and see it before they go against the Browns was important and beneficial.
And it wasn't just us as members of the media and fans at home that enjoyed seeing the players back out on that stadium grass. You saw some of those tweets roll through from the players, both young and old, saying how good it felt to be back in the bank. And speaking of social media, we want to engage with you. It starts on Twitter with our poll question every morning. Today's poll question: how many rushing yards do you expect Mark Ingram to have in 2020? The early returns in that 700 to 1,000 range. Obviously, last year, Cliff, he was a little over that 1,000 clip, but a big discussion point on the show through the first week here has been, look, that's a deep running back room with a lot of talent, so maybe those numbers get spread out. Also, everybody knows this, but we always want to remind you, Facebook is where you head, the comment section for your questions. We'll address them later in the show. Sometimes you can even produce the show. So, Cliff, when we look at Mark Ingram and those numbers and sort of the range we expect or you expect for 2020, where would you fall?
I'd put him close to 1,000, if not another 1,000-yard season for him. All three of his 1,000-yard seasons have come within the last 4 years. So, as Matt Weiss, the running backs coach, mentioned, Mark Ingram is a player who he believes is still ascending. which is not what you usually hear for a running back who's 30 years old, but he remains the leader of the group. I had a chance to talk to his personal trainer who he worked with in South Florida a few weeks ago. He really went at it hard to come back in the best shape of his life. He's as quick as he's ever been, as strong as he's ever been. Mark Ingram, I think, is really ready for another awesome season. And even though we've talked a lot about the 4 running backs, Mark Ingram, you know he wants that 1,000-yard season. You know he's going to be ready for all the work that he can carry. So I look for Mark, again, to be the leader of that group and be one of the best running backs in the NFL.
Absolutely. Those offseason workouts really capture the attention of a lot of folks. As you get to that 30 range, a lot of questions hover around what a running back can do. But one of the things we've mentioned is, while there's evidence to say that you can fall off a cliff, there's evidence right now with guys like Mark, Frank Gore, Adrian Peterson, that you can keep producing at a really high clip. You heard the horn, everybody, and if you've been watching the show, that means it's back to us on camera and to maybe some video or full screen graphics, because they're going to head into an install period. But it is a good chance to look back at some of the pictures, the video from yesterday's stadium practice with our top plays presented by Oakley. And Cliff, you were there. It was fun, not just to see the stadium itself, but the guys back out on the field. And some dudes made some plays. We've seen Marquise, but J.K. Dobbins, in my opinion, had the best day.
Yeah, I usually develop a rookie crush on at least one rookie, and this year it's J.K. Dobbins. I mean, just the way he moves, the way he can, in tight spaces, make guys miss, it's already evident. He was a great college running back at Ohio State. We all know that. But coming to this level, it looks like his speed is going to translate to this level. His moves are going to translate. That's one of the things people said about Lamar Jackson. Okay, he can make college defenders look bad. Can he make NFL defenders look bad when they try and tackle him? Obviously, Lamar can. I think J.K. Dobbins is going to be one of those guys who does that as well.
Cliff, I think you're going to have some competition in the crush department for J.K. Dobbins, but there's plenty to choose from this rookie class. Another guy who popped up in that video and really has been popping off the screen and off the practice field here the last week has been Willie Snead. So much talk about Marquise Hollywood Brown, but Willie Snead is not just an established vet who provides leadership and the ability to block. Cliff, he's been making plays downfield and in traffic over the course of these padded practices.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that for Willie, because to me, he's been an overlooked guy. There's obviously been so much talk about Marquise, the transformation he's made with his body, and obviously the 2 rookie wide receivers who were drafted, what's going to be their impact immediately. But Willie comes in every day, does his job. He's another guy who came in great shape, lost about 7 pounds last year. You see last year, 31 receptions, 339 yards. Those numbers would have been a lot higher, obviously, had the Ravens thrown the ball more. And he's also a key to their running game. He's a devastating blocker for a wide receiver. He welcomes that aspect of his game. And he's also going to be a mentor to these young receivers. And they couldn't have a better guy to emulate the way he works, his willingness to be physical, the way he's going up and catching balls in traffic. Obviously, he's a guy who, even though people haven't talked about him as much as some of the other wide receivers, he's certainly come in here and he's having an excellent training camp.
Our profile brought to you by Frank's Red Hot. That's a live picture of a leaned out Willie Snead. You're right, he does look to be in some impressive shape here early in camp. So as we mentioned, early install portion of practice. When we come back, it's into the individual drills. We'll bounce around. We'll take your topics, your questions as we get to know this team a little bit more. Week 2 of Training Camp Live, presented by Xfinity.
Feel like you've watched all the things? Now there's more to love with Xfinity X1, the ultimate entertainment experience. Like live sports, they're back with the best way to watch. And more streaming apps all in one place. More classics, more premieres, plus more to easily find using just your voice. Hello, more. Where have you been all my life?
Get this offer now with DVR service included for a year. Plus, get speed, coverage, and security with the Xfi Gateway. Click, call, or visit a store today.
If the last few months have taught us anything, it's that we really, really miss football. It's coming, and Ravens scratch-offs from the Maryland Lottery are already here. Play now for a chance to win up to $100,000, or second chance cash and Ravens prizes like seats for 20 years. Please play safely and responsibly.
That's a buffalo flatbread bullseye for my mouth to aim at. Oh, hiding, huh? The new grilled buffalo chicken papadilla. Tangy buffalo sauce, grilled chicken, and melty cheese for just $6. Papa John's.
At MedStar Health, your safety is always our top priority. That's why we're taking extra precautions so you can trust us to treat you safely. Visit medstarhealth.com/safe to learn more. MedStar Health, it's how we treat people. Welcome back into Training Camp Live, presented by Xfinity. Cliff, over the course of the last week, a large portion of our discussion has centered around the rookies and some of the new faces on this team. And we've kind of forgotten about the guys that are sandwiched in the middle of this draft class, maybe your middle child syndrome, if you will. Ben Bredeson and Broderick Washington, two players that were drafted in the 4th and 5th round, respectively, that maybe not counted on to make a huge impact out of the gate, but definitely provide some depth in some key areas.
No question. I mean, Bredeson's a guy, obviously going to Michigan. Coach Harbaugh had the inside intel on him, talking to his brother. So you know that he liked a lot of things he heard about Bredeson coming in, and we've seen that so far. I mean, he's working hard. The offensive linemen have been moving around a lot in training camp, learning different positions. And Bredeson, even if he's not a starter, he could be in a key role, moving as a backup in case someone gets hurt. Maybe he's a guy who can play both guard and tackle. And definitely he's learning a lot, I think, picking things up pretty quickly, so you know he's a hard worker.
And Broderick Washington coming into that defensive line group that has such great leadership. And let's get to know these guys a little bit more. As you mentioned, Bredeson played for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, and Washington was selected with that pick that Eric DeCosta so wisely, impressively was able to glean via the Kari Vedvik trade over the course of last training camp, which if you watched any of our draft coverage, you saw what that meant to Eric DeCosta and something he let Broderick Washington know. So Bredeson and Washington, two players that maybe aren't garnering the headlines here early in camp, but will be valuable pieces to this draft class this season and most likely for years to come. So as you see us back on camera here, that is the case, largely due to the fact they're still in installs. We are minutes away from individual drills kicking off. And Cliff, as we approach the chance to bounce around to different position groups, as we sit here on a Monday, and as I mentioned, less than 20 days from week 1, what position groups have you been focusing on as you've prepared to get back out here on the practice field to watch things in person?
Well, I think an obvious one to focus on is the offensive line. Coach Harbaugh said recently that he'd like to have the starting lineup there settled by the end of this week. Now, that's not a given that he's going to do that. It depends on how players perform. But there's been so much focus on who's going to be the new right guard. If they do solidify that this week, then I'm thinking as a player, this is my week to really show that I'm the guy who deserves a job. And we've seen so much from DJ Fluker, the way he's changed his body. He obviously has an edge in experience. He's certainly a guy to look at. And as these days build up, I think the weight loss is really going to help his stamina to be able to stack good days together. So I definitely will be looking at the offensive line. And then, of course, there's going to be a lot of eyes always on the secondary. And even now, you know, obviously we've seen a change there with Deshaun Elliott now getting some time. I think that's another player to watch this week. All these reps are going to be really important for him.
Deshaun Elliott's impact has been so limited due to injury, but you've been around this team the last few years. And what I find interesting and positive moving forward here, if he is to take that spot, is that when you hear coaches discuss him, whether it be Chris Hewitt yesterday, his position group, or even John Harbaugh, there's a lot of praise for a guy who hasn't been on the field in live game action very much. So that has to, in my opinion, speak to the fact that he's done a lot in this building and on this practice field when healthy to give them confidence as you look at Deshaun Elliott in the middle of your screen.
Yeah, I enjoyed Chris Hewitt's comments about Deshaun Elliott having so much confidence, maybe sometimes almost too much confidence.
Yeah, a little too much.
But that's something you want to see from a young player. This moment, I don't think it's not too big for him. Also, what better secondary to join than the Ravens if you're a young player? You've got Chuck Clark playing next to you. Everyone talks about his knowledge of the defense, maybe the most knowledgeable defensive player the Ravens have. You've got two Pro Bowl corners, Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, to help you out. You've also got Tavon Young coming back this year, one of the top nickelbacks in the league. So Deshaun doesn't have to do it all. He's not feeling that kind of pressure. He knows he's going to get a lot of help. Also, he was a playmaker in college. A guy who got interceptions, made plays. To me, that's something that, you don't always are able to teach. You either have that or you don't. He's got a nose for the football. You look at Geno Stone there, obviously another young player who the Ravens drafted, a young safety. Whether he's ready yet to get in the rotation and contribute this year, we'll have to see. But even if he's not, he's also learning from all these guys in the secondary who are more than willing to share their knowledge. So the Ravens, in my opinion, have the best secondary in football. That hasn't changed. But obviously, Deshaun Elliott's role in it looked like it's going to really grow a lot.
Can't wait to see what Deshaun Elliott can do. This scouting staff and Eric Acosta being able to target players like Deshaun Elliott and then Chuck Clark has proven to be really valuable as they've built out the depth in that group. Offensive line, defensive line, keeping with this theme of Bredesen and Broderick Washington. And there's DJ Fluker, Cliff. And you touched on what he's brought in terms of being a vet, a proven commodity, but largely the discussion early in camp is just where he is physically. I mean, dropping his body fat percentage in half. This is a big week in that competition for that right guard position, along with Ben Powers and some of the other names that have been floated to step in there. But Fluker continues to have positive reviews day in and day out. And this is when you start stacking days. When you think about it, Cliff, that's such a term that you hear from coaches. This is week 2, day 7 out on the field, in shells, but still physical. And Fluker doesn't seem to have skipped a beat.
No question. And as I mentioned before, I think obviously being in the best shape of his life is going to help that. And you see Matt Skura there also in the picture too. Another player to watch this week. What a tremendous recovery he's made from his knee surgery to even be out here participating in practices. Now he's being put into full drills with all his teammates rather than just individual stuff. Obviously, it's going to depend on how the knee comes along, whether he is ready to go week 1, but that's his goal. And definitely, he knows that he wants to stay as a starting center. So Matt Skura, just seeing him out on the field and the way he's been able to really progress from that knee injury with no setbacks is very, very encouraging for an offensive line that obviously blocks for Lamar Jackson and the best running attack in football.
A great shot of Lamar Jackson, Robert Griffin III making up this quarterback room along with McSorley and Huntley. Our first Facebook comments starting to come in. Good morning, fellas. Let's do work this morning. That's what we're trying to do, and these guys are bringing it early in terms of the energy out on the field. And look, there's no doubt, I have to imagine, from a player's perspective and on that offensive and defensive side, to see Lamar jog out, look healthy, look like he's ready to go after a couple days to get right, get some rest in early in camp is such a positive sign. And he's such a competitor, Cliff. I have to imagine that this is always going to be a bit of a tug when looking at, hey, we need to make sure that we manage you correctly to get you ready to be at your best week 1, because as best we know Lamar, he doesn't want to miss any time.
Oh, no question. You have to tell Lamar he can't play, hide his helmet or something, because you know that he wants to be out there. But, again, I think it's good sometimes in training camp to get a little break. And all Ravens fans now are breathing easier seeing him back on the field. But you would definitely want him to be 100% week 1. That's the goal. We know that Lamar, he's ready to play. He's having a very good camp. To me, there's been so much talk about can he raise his level of play after having an MVP season. Well, that's what great players do. I mean, it's a challenge for every great player. After you have a great season, what can you do differently? I thought it was James Urban's comments about adding more tricks to your bag was an interesting way to put it. And Lamar, his mental aspect is always good. He's a guy that he's the unquestioned leader of this team. We all know how driven he is to win a Super Bowl, and that's the aura that he brings to the field every day. So, yes, his teammates are glad to see him back, but obviously Ravens fans, they're glad to see him back too. And we'll see. He's still got 3 weeks to get ready for week 1. I expect him to start the season really strongly like he did last year.
Cliff, let's bounce over to Tavon Young. Question via Dre on Facebook. Remember, comment section, your questions, comments, we'll try our best to get to them. Probably haven't talked enough about Tavon Young because of some of the other things happening in that secondary. But on top of the fact that when healthy, he's one of the top nickel corners in the game, he looks, when we do, and I joked about this last week, Cliff, where I feel like we talk about weight and body type. so much during the early portions of camp just because guys transform themselves over the course of the offseason. But Tavon looks big, strong, and ready for hopefully a full 2020 season, and he's as much a part of the mix there in providing stability in that position group as anybody.
No question. I mean, it's obviously was a blow to lose Tavon last year, and definitely no one felt that more than him. But also his body, didn't take a pounding last year. He's come back in great shape, as you mentioned, Evan. And yeah, I think Tavon is overlooked because, the nickelback, playing next to, Marlon and Marcus Peters, sometimes you get overlooked. He's a playmaker too. He's a guy that he's a sure tackler, maybe the best tackler in the secondary. He also looks to strip the ball, and we've known he's made some scoop and scores during his career. He's a difference maker defensively and adds a level of toughness to their defense. So, yeah, I think there's a little rust that, maybe he had to work off early, but right now he looks like a guy who wasn't away last year, and I think he'll be all systems go week 1.
Rolling along here on a Monday, Training Camp Live presented by Xfinity. Going to take a short timeout and come back with more live pictures from the field. Head to Facebook and let us know what you want us to talk about, maybe what you want to see.
Wawa hoagies are a winning pick for game day. Every hoagie's made with the ingredients you crave in varieties you love. From toasty cheesesteak to mouthwatering meatball, Italian, and more, there's a hoagie for every mood and every appetite. Stop in, order ahead with the Wawa mobile app, or get it delivered. When you're planning for the game, we have you covered with Wawa Catering. Make your game day a winner with Wawa hoagies, snacks, and drinks. Wawa is the official hoagie of the Baltimore Ravens. Gotta have a Wawa.
You can see it in the eyes of every Ravens fan. An unwavering commitment to the team they love. A pride so vibrant, it can be seen from miles away. A community that's fully committed to their team and shows up week after week to help chase a championship. To the Ravens flock, to chat starters, to those who bleed purple, M&T Bank wants to say, we're your biggest fan.
Stay connected to the Ravens from anywhere. Download the official Ravens app today to get all sorts of exclusive content, podcasts, live video, photos, breaking news, and more. It's a great way to experience everything Ravens. And it's where you can keep up with my co-host for the next, 7 days here, Cliff. Obviously, you're a constant presence on all the Ravens content apps. And your fresh perspective is much needed here, as much as we love Ryan Mink. A different set of eyes, Cliff, on this defensive line group. We spent a lot of time on Calais Campbell because it just feels like he came in and from day one, meeting one, felt like he'd been home here in Baltimore for a long time. But what else has stood out to you from the guys up front?
Well, yeah, obviously there's been so much talk about the big three, Calais, Brandon Williams, and Derek Wolfe. But as we talked about Broderick Washington and also Justin Wedebuike, we know the Ravens like to rotate defensive linemen, and those guys take a pounding on every play. So Brandon and those older vets are going to want to mentor these young guys, and I think that's exactly what's happening because they know they're going to get some reps. And so far, I think it's been going very well. That's the culture the Ravens have built here, where they have such a talented roster that their starters can now pass it along to the younger players when they come in to show them how to practice, how to study film, do all those things that make you a better player that a young player may not know. And what better guys to learn from than guys like Brandon Williams, Calais, Derek Wolfe, who still put in the work even though they're established players. I think it's interesting. I've noticed Calais after practice, staying, working with Brandon Williams on things. Different stunts they want to do maybe this season to get to know each other better because even though Calais is an established all-pro player, he hasn't played with these guys. So it's going very well on the defensive line.
We see from Christopher on Facebook, I'd like to see Juice Man. I mentioned at times will allow you to produce this show. So Christopher, there you go, my friend. Marcus Peters back on the field missed a couple days of practice with what was described as a soft tissue injury. Positive sign to have him back out there. Another player, maybe the 2019 version of what we saw from Calais and Mark Ingram, someone who came in mid-season, Cliff, and really fit right into what the culture is here and really feels comfortable with this group and made a ton of plays. And one of the things I love about this defensive back group, and Marcus Peters speaks to this, is that everybody's got a unique skill set that Don Wink Martindale, defensive coordinator, can employ as he best sees fit. And I think that having all those different types of guys in the back end there is such a luxury that, as you said, probably is a large reason why this is maybe one of the best secondaries in the league.
Yeah, no question. I mean, Marcus Peters, Christopher wants to see Marcus Peters, but opposing quarterbacks do not.
He'll find him, though. He's always looking. Nobody eyes the backfield more than Marcus Peters.
Incredible. He just has an incredible skill for finding the football. And I thought it was interesting also listening to Marlon Humphrey talk about Marcus Peters, how he's trying to learn that skill as well to enhance himself as a cornerback. I mean, Marlon's already a Pro Bowl player, but there is nobody like Marcus Peters in the NFL today when it comes to picking off the football. So yes, having him back and on the field is obviously a good sign, but he's an instant difference maker, as he proved last season with the pick six, the first play against Seattle, or the first game he played in a Ravens uniform against Seattle. That kind of set the tone for who Marcus Peters is. He's a young player, another great move by Eric DeCosta to get him not only on the team but under contract. So they have the foundation of a young, gifted secondary that they can grow together for years.
Secondary, along with Marlon Humphrey, making two of the most feared corners in the league. And there's a guy we profiled earlier, Ben Bredesen, the fourth-round pick out of Michigan. Some action here against the I guess you'd call him the heavy bag, if you will, and getting some work snapping the football too. So if he's going to see time over the course of this season, Cliff, he's got to be prepared to slide into most positions, I would imagine. So that could include some work at center.
No question. I mean, offensive line depth is something that all teams worry about, and you want to have guys who are versatile, who can play multiple positions, so in case anyone gets hurt, they may be able to slide in there. Bredesen, that could be his role certainly this season, and it's good that he's showing that type of versatility already, that he might be a guy who's able to do that. James Hurst has been that guy for the Ravens the past few years. He's not here. Bredesen can certainly fill into that role.
Roderick Washington, the other part of that middle of the draft class, your middle children, if you will. And look, the body type is perfect for that defensive tackle position. Low center of gravity, 305 pounds out of Texas Tech. And he's a guy who started all 3 seasons there in Lubbock, was a team captain his junior and senior season. So on top of the production on the field, clearly a guy that program counted on for leadership. And that's part of the draft process, Cliff, that the fans probably don't spend as much time on, but does a player fit into what it is you're trying to build in terms of an identity of a position group, but also just the locker room as a whole? And Washington, at least on paper, would appear to fit that very nicely.
No question, and he also fit with the Ravens' theme of the draft this year, which is really targeting players from big-time conferences, guys who were used to playing in front of 100,000 people against top-level competition. Washington was one of the best players on his team. Going week to week, he was the focus of a lot of offensive coordinators. We have to block this guy. Saw a lot of double teams. Showed a willingness to not lose his, aggressiveness, even though he knew there were going to be 2 guys on him and maybe he couldn't make plays the way he wanted to. So he's a mauler, he's a fighter, he's got the kind of DNA you look for from a defensive tackle. And again, I mean, learning from guys like Brandon and Calais, Derek Wolfe, that's only going to help his development.
I'm glad you brought that up about the approach this year in terms of selecting players from some big-time programs, because we touched on it briefly yesterday. But I think in this offseason that is so unique, and the ability to really get professional experience, if you will, is going to be severely limited, really non-existent other than within your own building until week 1. I feel like those players from the big programs will take less time to transition to the bright lights of an NFL game starting against the Browns at home. but we'll touch base with Noah. Are we able to see Prochet and Duvernay? Well, I think you just saw Devin Duvernay making his way to this side of the field here as the offense is getting a little bit of work. Prochet, Cliff, has been the early bird worker here through the first 7 days of practice. He's usually the first guy out on the field working on the jugs, getting his footwork in. Good look at Orlando Brown Jr., too, becoming an anchor and a leader of that offensive line. Ronnie, along with Orlando Brown Jr. So maybe not the guys inside where the big question marks are, but you know what you have on the bookends with Ronnie and Orlando Brown Jr.
Yeah, no question. Those are the keys now to the offensive line now that Marshall Yonder is retired. Ronnie, to me, established himself as the best left tackle in football last year. He wants to keep that mantle, or certainly prove to people who don't believe he's the best left tackle that he is. He seems ready to do that. Orlando Brown Jr. on the other side, making his first Pro Bowl as a young player. He has so much talent. Both of these guys do. They're also very intelligent, and they work hard. I mean, Ronnie, people knew he had talent coming into the league, but people were saying, well, how much does he love football and all those kind of silly questions. He's proven all that wrong. He's been durable. He's played through injuries, and he's gotten better every year. And now the bar for him is extremely high because he's already a guy who really, how do you improve as a left tackle? Well, what you want to do is to be consistent year after year like the great ones have done. And to have a guy protecting Lamar Jackson's blind side like that, you couldn't ask for anything more. We saw that tweet pop up from Ronnie Stanley giving a shout-out, a congrats to his Bayern Munich squad. The Champions League wrapping up, and they garnered the championship. So sports fans across the league here in the NFL, the NBA playoffs going off. I'm sure a lot of guys are watching those as well. Revisiting our Twitter poll, how many rushing yards do you expect Mark Ingram to have in 2020? And it's a landslide, 700 to 1,000. And Cliff, I do think that that's probably a safe bet. I mean, I don't think, and I've made this point a number of times over the last week, that numbers need to be the focus this season, whether they be for Lamar, Mark Ingram, the offense in general, just because they set such a unreal standard in 2019, but success to me doesn't necessarily mean matching or exceeding those numbers. But if Mark's in that 700 to 1,000 range, you know that you've got a healthy leader back there that's making an impact week in and week out. No question. I mean, as I mentioned before, he has 3,000-yard seasons in his career. However, all three of them have come over the last 4 years. And we know the Ravens run the football more than any team in the NFL. So we don't know how the running back committee is going to shake out. You've got four guys who you don't have any problems giving the football to at any time. But I think Mark, just like last year, remains the leader of that backfield. He's been extremely durable during his career. And yeah, he may not get to 1,000 this year, but his yards per carry, five yards per clip last year, he could maybe even increase that this year. I think he's looking to do that. So I think he wants to break some more long runs. We know he can run physically. Mark has great vision, too. Very rarely do you see Mark Ingram miss a hole. If the hole's there, he's going to find it and get through it. So, again, I think that he could go over 1,000, but if he doesn't, I expect him to have an extremely productive year either way. Testament to his football IQ, and came into this camp in incredible shape and making up what is a really fun running back group, as you see Gus Edwards there to monitor. That'll do it for this session of individual drills. They're about to get into the teamwork and the team installs, so we'll go dark for a little while, but make sure to stay tuned for the post-practice press conferences. This is a good lineup today, Cliff. We got John Harbaugh, obviously, making his updates as best he can. Mark Andrews from the tight end group, the Pro Bowler, and then that possible new back end with Deshaun Elliott and Chuck Clark. We'll also have top plays later in the show. Maybe Lamar Jackson, after a couple days off, will revisit the top plays. It's not hard to bet on him day in and day out. Cliff, this was fun, man. I'll see you tomorrow. We're back at 9 a.m. Eastern here for Training Camp Live, presented by Xfinity. Have a great Monday, everybody.